Okay, maybe we'll, let's go ahead and get started. If others join us, we'll just bring them up to speed afterwards. But thank you, everyone, and thank you for your time today. My name is Anna McCartney-Melstead. I am the co-chair of the SBCC working group for the moment. And we have been working since the early 2010s, actually before that, 2009, to really bring strength to the malaria social and behavior change community. And we've been doing this in a number of ways. As most of you know, as you have been selected as consultants for the CRSPC, and I think I met all of you virtually. I was on the interview panel. There's a number of countries that continue to struggle with their SBC needs, and it is in our best interest to make sure everyone's on the same page. And so the objectives of this session are really to, since this is a new roster, familiarize everyone with the SBCC working group tools, templates, and resources that are available for your work as you're dispatched to different countries. Also to connect the consultants with the Malaria SBC community and identify some people with whom they can turn to, or to whom they can turn to with questions, for ideas, et cetera, et cetera. Some of you are part of this community already, others are newcomers. We also will discuss the need to standardize national SBCC strategic plans across countries and talk about some ways in which to do that. And then we'll also discuss the need for solid data and for SBC to be taken as seriously as the other interventions in the malaria response. So I see that everyone has introduced themselves here. Maybe I'll just give everyone a chance to introduce themselves orally as well. Maybe we could start with Dawn. Okay, maybe we could start with Rihanna.
Hi everyone, my name is Rihanna and I'm working with RBM under the CRSPC partner committee, and I'm located in Geneva. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Dowdy?
Hi everyone, I'm Dowdy Ocheng, working with Malaria Consortium in Uganda, and I'm a consultant with RBM. Thank you.
Hi Anna, this is Don Dickerson. I'm sorry, I thought I was off mute. I'm with USA PMI in Washington. Thank you. Okay,
thanks so much. Just to note that Don and Dowdy have been active members of the SBC working group for a number of years now. Mohammed? Mohammed, you are on mute if you're trying to speak. Okay, let's move on to Rushin.
Hi everyone, this is Ruchin. Currently working in supporting UNICEF Philippines on COVID-19 response. And I have been on as a consultant in the roster with RBM for like almost a year or so. Nice to meet you all virtually.
Thank you so much. And Mohammed, are you able to get through? I know we were speaking earlier. Okay, so well, just to let everyone know, Mohammed is working as a consultant with Malaria Consortium, and he is located in Asia. So good evening to those who are joining us after hours, and we appreciate your availability. And good morning to those in the US, and we'll try to keep this to an hour, maybe a little bit over an hour. But this is just the first contact. And like I said, this is a new roster. We wanted to make sure everyone is on the same page. So we are going to go ahead and go through this presentation. Please, if you have questions, type them into the chat box and or you know, shout them out as we're going along. So here's the agenda. Actually, maybe let's, oops, so sorry. Let's go through our objectives. Like I said, are there any questions on the objectives today? Okay. Well, as I mentioned, the social and behavior change working group, and we've now just recently rebranded to drop that second communication, that second C, has been in existence for a number of years now. And we've really been working to add credibility to the field, build best practices, and bring the SBC people at the country level up to speed in a way that hadn't been done as it had with other thematic areas in the malaria response. So this is a photo from our latest meeting. It was in Maputo in September of 2019. And you are all welcome to join. We have quarterly calls where we have technical updates and secretariat updates as well. We have what has been an annual meeting, which might shift to every other year meeting, where we bring everyone together. And as you can see, it's a large group that attends these meetings. And it's kind of a pseudoscientific setup in that we have a lot of great poster presentations, and we also have you know, opportunities for countries to share their experiences, when we're really trying to make you know, kind of transform the field into something that used to be underinvested in and undervalued into something that is taken seriously and given the appropriate amount of resources. So that's just a little bit of background on the working group. Sorry, I promise I will figure this orientation of the clicker out. So the agenda for today, very brief background on the working group. Like I said, we've only rebranded as in the past week to the SBC working group. And the reason that we dropped the second C, so it's no longer social and behavior change communication, now it's rather SBC, social and behavior change, is that the field is really evolving, and communication is one of several ways in which behavior can be changed, but we're realizing there are other types of interventions that can help behavior change, such as you know, behavioral economics, other kinds of methods that can help influence behavior. So we want to make sure we encompass all of those. We'll have an orientation to the tools and templates from the working group, including our framework, our SBCC indicator reference guide, which is quite an important document as well. The developing SBCC M&E plans, a checklist for reporting on malaria SBCC, priority research areas for malaria SBCC, and we'll get into the ITN SBCC toolkit. We'll also talk about the optional MIS malaria SBCC module, the Malaria SBCC database, and the Malaria SBCC quality checklist. And although our working group has been rebranded, these documents at the time in which they were developed were SBCC, so we're going to just go ahead and stay with that. We're not going to get into great depth into all of these documents, but it's a way for folks to see what's available, and then you know, all of these documents are available in a folder. Rihanna sent out the link in the chat box, and we can everyone can access all of these materials from there. As I mentioned, the working group met in September. We had 130 participants from 28 countries, mostly malaria endemic. For the next work year, the next year, we have 3 work streams working on different products and priorities. So we have continued work with the DHS on this module for inclusion on the MIS or DHS. And I'll talk a bit more about this later. But basically, there's high variation in the number of SBC questions that go onto MIS and DHS surveys, and there's an effort to standardize those and also make the quality such that decision-making for programs can be based on those, on the indicators that we put onto those big surveys. Workstream 2 is looking at an SBC package for community health workers. And Workstream 3 is looking building a guidance document for SBC in varied malaria transmission settings. We know that you know, stratification is a big issue, and you know, just as we give guidance in other situations such as COVID, which I'll be talking about a bit later, you know, countries are looking to us for help in thinking through the different needs for SBC in those different transmission settings. So why care about SBC? And most of you, well, I think all of us are sold on SBC since we are consultants and stakeholders in the community. But just to go over a few reasons. So when it comes to case management and IPTP, you know, care seeking for fever is a really big one, especially now in the COVID era. Early and frequent ANC attendance. We also can help with demand creation for testing and treatment adherence. And increasingly, health providers are becoming more of a target audience to change their behaviors. We're realizing that providers don't always stick to test results or even test with RDTs in the first place. And so, you know, they are becoming more of an audience, you know, depending on the country. When it comes to IRS and to residual spraying, we have acceptance, rumor management, and then also being able to communicate to folks about how nets and IRS fit together within communities. Sometimes there's both in a community or a region. And, you know, I think at the very core of SBC is the dignity of all people and the respect of all people, and communicating to people what's going on, you know, is really at the core of SBC across health areas. So when it comes to ITNs and insecticide treated nets, we talk about how SBC can contribute to the longevity of nets, better targeting of actual net use interventions. We'll talk about the use to access gap, the standard to PBO, and actually that should just be new nets change. You know, there's change of the different nets with the new nets coming out that would need to be addressed, and then repurposing of nets. So, you know, historically commodities have been the focus, commodities and services have been the focus of malaria interventions. But commodities are only effective if people seek them and use them correctly and consistently. And so this has been a missing piece for many. And we want to make sure that, you know, that the commodities and the services and use and demand all fit together. And so that's going to be your tasks as consultants. So this is just to underscore that ITN survival, the life of an ITN can be really extended depending on people's behavior. And so this is just a map of, or a graph of different countries and how long nets lasted. And you can see, you know, in some places in DRC, people's behavior with their nets resulted in a much smaller lifespan of that net compared to Nigeria, for example. And so we'll talk about this more a bit later, but it's just to underscore that, you know, that the SBC contribution is real and also has and can have an impact on, you know, the commodities that are being invested in the millions and billions of dollars. So we're past the point of awareness raising. Knowledge of malaria, the causes and prevention in Africa in most places, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, is high to very high. But the core message I want folks to walk away with is that knowledge does not equal behavior change. And I think that I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but many countries use that knowledge indicator as their indicator for their SBC sections of the National Malaria Control Programs as the indicator to change. And so we need the consultants who are going to be able to directly influence what goes into the plans to really be advocates for this, because we know that a lot of people know that sleeping on, or that, malaria is transmitted by mosquitoes doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to turn that knowledge into behavior change. Another problem that has been kind of plaguing the Malaria SBC arena for the past 10 or so years is when SBC is called, when events or doodads and knickknacks are called SBC, when really we know SBC is a research and theory and systems-based approach, and the channels are based on audience needs communicated in ways that are scientifically known to influence malaria behaviors. So it's really a science, but if you look at many countries' budgets for SBC, you'll see t-shirts, caps, maybe hanging up some posters, or maybe a single launch event. But we really need to elevate the SBC that we're doing and investing in. And like I said, I think I'm preaching to the choir on this. Are there any questions so far? You can unmute yourselves and talk if there are any questions. Any questions? No? Okay. Let's continue. So when we talk about what the factors are that actually do influence behavior, the last slide I talked about how, knowledge is not necessarily tied to behavior change. And then most times it's absolutely, it's not at all. I mean, these different factors, these different psychosocial factors are those that the science has shown can and do influence people's malaria behaviors. So we have our cognitive factors like beliefs, values, the perceived risk, how much at risk we believe we and our families are of getting malaria and being seriously affected by malaria. Subjective norms and self-image. Emotionally, we have our emotional response, we have empathy, and we have self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is our ability, our belief in our ability to do things to prevent malaria and to treat malaria. We also have social support and influence and personal advocacy. And so these are the factors which the science of social and behavior change across health areas have identified these different factors as those that usually influence behavior in addition to knowledge, but rarely does knowledge itself change humans' behaviors. So everyone has had the URL, and like I said, Rihanna kindly put it in the chat box. So there's a folder there, and you can see all of the different documents in that folder. The documents are in a number of languages. Most are in English, French, and some are in Portuguese as well. Many are in Portuguese. So the RBM SBC working group has developed a number of guidance documents, and we're going to go through them today quite briefly, some of them, and in greater detail and others. Did anyone have any problems getting getting that link, getting into this this folder where you can see all of the documents? Any problems?
No.
Okay. Oh. No problems. Thank you, Don. Very good. Okay, thanks, Hannah. Okay, the first document we're going to talk about is the Strategic Framework for Malaria SBCC. And this is from 2018 to 2030. This is our overall framework document that has guidance to ensure that SBC is prioritized in the agendas of malaria policymakers and national strategic plans. So this is really the document we want all of the consultants to know by heart. We would love for you guys to digest this and know it back and forth. Much of the content in here, as you are SBC professionals, is not going to be new information, but it was important to kind of standardize the language, especially when we're talking about the different models. Many NGOs and have different models for the same type of thing, and so we really made an effort to kind of harmonize all of the models, all of the kind of the theories and everything, to make a document that is general enough for everyone to be able to access. So this strategic framework is really broken into 3 sections. So the first section is about advocacy, and this is advocacy for Malaria SBC. This is, championing, the cause of Malaria SBC, why Malaria SBC should get resources, and it's really looking at how to tie into the global network and then also maybe some of the local networks as well. So that's the first section. Then we have technical guidance on SBC, and that's where it gets into some of the tools or the models that I talked about earlier. And then there's a number of tools and resources. So this actually will make your jobs quite easy. Oh, this is a bit difficult to see, but you'll see that everything is really based on the socio-ecological model, and we've really kind of filled it out for folks. It's hard to see on this slide, but you can see it in the document. The framework really walks everyone through the process of developing comprehensive SBC programs. And, whether it's sea change or whether it was HCP or, C4D, everyone has more or less the same processes, which is you need to find out a lot about the problem before you address it. You need to make a plan. You need to have, have done some formative research, make your plan, develop your materials, all the while, abiding by international best practices in materials development. So this is kind of a conglomeration of the P process and the C change and the model as well. But in the end, this planning process is something that, like I said, shouldn't be new to anybody. And it also highlights the importance of coordination of activities across partners. I would say the coordination of Malaria SBC is something that is quite lacking in the community. It's never fun or sexy to do the coordination of activities. And there are some NMCPs that see the value and some that don't see the value in the coordination piece. But just coordinating the activities, if we can get all of the activities coordinated geographically, message-wise, would really do a lot for the field of SBC. Okay, so now I'm going to share with you, we have some hot off the presses National Malaria SBC strategy templates. Most of you in your scopes of work will be, or many of you in your scopes of work will be asked and tasked with developing national malaria SBC strategies. Oops, one moment. Okay, stop share. Yeah. So there are 2 documents available now. First document is called the National Malaria Social and Behavior Change Strategy. So this template is really user-friendly. And so when you are tasked with going into a country, you can literally go in and oops, let's see. Sorry, guys. I need to share my screen again. Okay, here we go. So this is a user-friendly template. You can go in and literally just, use the template for your country SBC plans, and it goes, really line by line, and gives you a really clear and user-friendly template, like I said. Along with the template itself are some, or is the guidance on what to put where and where to get the information for which parts. And so also a number of resources, and all of these resources are all of them that you would need really to develop the strategy. And I know there's different methods for developing strategies, but we are making an effort to standardize the way in which strategies look and feel across countries, because at the moment there are a lot of different types of strategies that come out, and some of them are quite shallow, some of them are more detailed. But let me see. Are these strategy documents available in the link you sent in the chat box? Yes, Don, they are. They are, this is an addendum to the strategic framework document. So these documents are in the folder labeled strategic framework. So this is just to show you that you have really great resources at your fingertips to be able to develop strategies, and that there are, you don't need to reinvent any wheels. We have everything very directly and rather easily. Obviously the work is populating all of this stuff. But we hope that this will make your jobs a lot easier. We also hope that it will help standardize across countries the content that is in these, and also make sure that the quality is of the standard that we need across countries too. Okay, can everybody see the PowerPoint again? I'm a newbie when it comes to sharing screens, so okay. The next document I'm going to talk about. Are people seeing my screen? You see the document? Oh, Hannah still sees the PDF. Does anyone else? Okay, let me try to do this again. Thank you for those who are helping us sister out here. Okay, what about now? Can folks see the PowerPoint now? It says SBC. Okay, great. Thanks, Rihanna. Okay, the next document we're going to be looking at is the SBCC Indicator Reference Guide, and this is the second edition. So this came out of a real need to standardize the indicators for SBC, which was greatly needed, especially about 5-10 years ago. Prioritize indicators and really get people thinking about how to measure SBC in a way that it hadn't been measured in the malaria sphere before. So this is an excellent resource. All of the indicators you could ever need or want are in this reference guide that would need to be included in national strategies. And we're really encouraging that the indicators from this guide make it into the national strategies, even the national strategic plans. At the moment, a lot of the national strategic plans have indicators for the SBC units of the NMCPs to be really focused on these questions that have been historically asked in the the DHS and MIS, which are about exposure to media, knowledge, etc. And as I mentioned, we're moving past that. So the more of these well thought out indicators we can include in the national strategic plans, the better, because those then drive the questions and indicators that go into the national surveys. And so, we could have a different session just for this, talking about this at a different time, but it is really, really, really critical. So it's broken into 3 sections: selecting and monitoring indicators, which looks at a framework. There's also recommended priority indicators, and then there's resources complete with questions that can be used for surveys. So that's the next part. Once you pick an indicator, what is a question that can be then developed to be used on surveys? And what we found is people develop different questions for the same indicator. It makes it really hard to compare across countries. So so we have suggestions for that as well. Okay, so the selection of indicators really looks at the program's need throughout the life of the program. And so this is common sense, but it really helps you think through the types of indicators you're going to need throughout, from formative to baseline to process monitoring, all the way to end line evaluation. There's different indicators that you need for different parts of the life of the program. And this section really walks you through that nicely. This is also, the framework for linking SBC activities to behavioral outcomes, excuse me, is something that many countries lack in their strategic plans or strategic SBC plans. What they're going to be doing and the outputs from that are actually going to result in behavioral income. So this does a really nice job of linking the activities with the intermediate outcomes, and those intermediate outcomes leading then to the behavioral outcomes. So I would encourage you to internalize this as well. And really, whenever you're thinking about activities, really be thinking through the entire process of why would we propose such an activity? How does it actually influence an intermediate outcome and a behavioral outcome? So, you know, the framework shows that effective SBC requires that messages reach the target audience, of course, that those messages influence how people think or feel about malaria, and finally, that they adopt the behaviors. So, like I said, there's a number of different outcomes that we look at, and those should be included as well in the plans that you're working on, or the different tasks that you were asked to do. Also, there's discussion about different data sources, and a lot of times folks lean on the DHS, the MIS, or the mix, the household surveys, but there are other data sources as well that you should be considering when you're doing your different scopes of work, including CAP surveys, health facility data sources, qualitative data, activity reports, omnibus surveys. So there's a number of different data sources, and a lot of times that takes, you know, poking when you meet with different partners, getting from them what kind of data sources they have available and what kind they would recommend. But so these are just some suggestions of data sources in case you hadn't thought of a certain data source. I mentioned the 17 priority indicators. 17 sounds like a lot, but we believe that these indicators are really the most important. In our previous version, we had broken down kind of the indicators into core indicators, experimental indicators, but what we realized is we really need to have top indicators that every country can get on board with following and keeping on top of. So these are broken into the following categories: recall, exposure, and knowledge, which are already a part of many plans. Risk and efficacy, we talked a bit about that earlier. Norms, attitudes, behavior, not just of the beneficiaries, but also of the providers, and program outputs. And so we would love to see the priority indicators in the strategic SBC plans where possible. And because, like I said, what makes it into the plans is what often guides what goes into the surveys. Should all 17 indicators be in every strategy, and what is worded as in the reference guide? Yeah, no, Don, not necessarily, but we can go into the reference guide after we finish this part and see exactly what the guidance is. But no, I mean, obviously all of this is context specific. Everything we're showing you must be adapted to the local context. So although I'm advocating for, you know, as much as possible, including priority indicators, if there are, you know, if it doesn't apply to a certain country, of course, you wouldn't want to include that in the country strategy. So we also have a number of annexes in this, and the theories of communication and behavior change. Those theories are pretty, you know, those are consistent across organizations and you know, schools of thinking in the social and behavior change arena. But it's nice to have them all in one place, and so you can see those in the annex of this document. There's also a checklist for reporting on Malaria SBC evaluations, which we'll go over in a bit. And like I said earlier, there's survey questions and measurement tools. And so those survey questions are really helpful to countries as well. So when you're working with a country, you can also you know, share with them these documents for when it's time for them to move on to a different type of activity, such as drafting survey questions. Are there any other questions on the framework or the monitoring or the indicator reference guide before we move on? Any questions? You could type them in the box, or you could shout them out. Okay, let's continue. So as I mentioned, research and monitoring in Malaria SBC has been historically not very strong, although we've seen this really change in the past 10 or so years. This document is developing M&E plans for malaria SBC programs. And this also is kind of married to the previous document we were discussing, the indicator reference guide. When thinking about what to monitor in your SBC program, instead of t-shirts handed out, number of radio spots, broadcast, for example, really thinking through and developing an M&E plan holistically from the beginning is what this document does, and it really helps us walk through this. And so when there might be some scopes of work that include developing M&E plans, and this document will really help you with that. So it's broken into two parts. So there's a step-by-step taking you through developing the M&E plan, and then there's also the elements of the M&E plan. Oops, here we go. And as I mentioned before, and there is overlap between a lot of these documents, and that's quite intentional. Monitoring and evaluation needs the data sources during the entire life of the SBC program. So, we talk about the life of the SBC program and the types of monitoring and evaluation needs and data sources you're going to need during that. So it's really, it's a great document, like I said, to take you step by step by step. So I won't go through this in detail, but these are the steps to developing an M&E plan, and these are steps most people would take anyway. But when you're working through this document, it really helps to take a step back and consider, and be very intentional about the development of the plan. Oops. Okay, and the elements of an M&E plan, this is pretty standard as well, but we want the M&E plans also to be standardized across countries to ensure, quality and standardize as much as possible, of course, according to the country's context. This document also goes into research and evaluation plans, both formative, could be health facility, could be other, but it gets you thinking more about not just the monitoring that goes on kind of a day-to-day basis, but also the more research and eval type things you're going to need to consider, and putting those into your plan as well, and making sure you really devote the time needed to make sure that those are quality. So this is, just another part of the document where you can see that, when you're thinking through, who is the data used for SBC programs, you're really considering who and what decisions need to be involved and what data products are needed. Sometimes, unfortunately, M&E comes and just sits, a report is written and it sits on a shelf, but we need to take it a step further and see, how the data can be presented in a way that's accessible to people outside of the malaria SBC community, and in a way that actually has the impact that we want it to. Also, there's a sample budget template. Of course, M&E needs to be budgeted appropriately, and I think that considering this while you are, considering all of the other activities is quite important. And this really adds some budget items that most people or some people might not think of, to be able to really fund the M&E holistically. The next document is a checklist for reporting on malaria SBC program evaluations. So we saw this as a need when we were bringing together peer-reviewed literature and gray literature across countries, across continents, across scholars. And we really saw that there was inconsistent reporting in SBC program evaluations and write-ups. And that, we believe, adds to some of the kind of, lack of credibility that the field used to have, because you weren't able to read at malaria SBC programs and be able to compare apples to apples, or even be able to compare one program and understand how alike or different it was to another program that was described in a different paper. So again, in kind of the interest of standardization, this checklist was developed. And so we encourage folks when they are writing up their malaria SBC success stories and their malaria articles and different things. And, you know, I think that adding to the literature about malaria SBC is another agenda item that the working group takes quite seriously. We'd like to see a lot more of that. But making sure that these key points are reported on across malaria SBC program write-ups is quite important. Did I see some questions in the chat box? Oops. Okay, here we go. Do we have any tool that to analyze SBC capacities of the countries? That is a really great question. Thank you, Rasheen. And so I assume what you mean here is the SBC capacities of the National Malaria Control Programs themselves, their SBC units. There are two tools that I can think of that seek to do this. One kind of looks at the department as a whole, and then there are tools that can look at individuals within the department. So I'm happy to share those as well. They are the one that looks at the department as a whole gathers everyone together and as a consensus kind of comes, as a consensus type of approach, asks folks to rate the department on different aspects of SBC capacity. And then there are a number of SBC trainings available that do kind of pre and post tests for individuals. I think what we have found is that the key to great SBC at the country level within the NMCPs are some committed individuals that really become the champions, and you know, developing their SBC skills and their capabilities can go a long way towards bringing others on board as well. So you know, I think that training for building SBC capacity at the national levels is something that does go into a lot of plans and should go into a lot of plans. And you know, the appetite for donor funding for that, you know, varies greatly by country and context. But I'll make sure to put both of those types of evaluations for SBC capacity at the country level, the NMCP level, in the folder. Okay, so I mentioned that the checklist for reporting on malaria SBC evaluations, you know, I talked about that. Oops. So these are some of the things on the checklist. So was the behavioral, what behavioral problem was this intervention intended to address? So there are some very fundamental things that we found were not in every write-up. So, you know, this checklist is quite easy to work through. And so this is something that could be done before, you know, submission to a journal or, you know, to a donor or whatever, but just to make sure that, you know, everything that we're putting out has this information. Also the study design, you know, like I said, this is an easy checklist. And, you know, there aren't a ton of questions, but I think that it's something that can easily be taken up by any NGO, any government, and it will really, I think, start to build credibility in the field. We have priority research areas. So these are priority research areas for malaria SBC. So if you want to propose research in your upcoming works, these are some priority areas that we've already vetted as a community that would help move the field forward. So, you know, I know not many countries necessarily have funding for operations research, but if they do, or actually it's good to put it in the plans anyway, you know, these can help you with selecting what those would be if there aren't already current demands. This document can also help with shaping the operations research, the priority research area that you would include in your plan to make sure that it's adding to the knowledge management field for Malaria SBC as well. So I'm glad we have Hannah Conker on this call. She was actually the chief of party for the project that developed this next document. So if we have questions, maybe I'll ask her to take them. But this is a really, really great resource. And this is looking at social and behavior change for nets, for insecticide-treated nets across their lifespan. And there are different points during their lifespan that different different SBC, that they have different SBC needs. So, from acquiring the net to using the net to caring for the net to the end of life, this toolkit takes you through and really nicely brings everything, all of the different phases together. And so it's a different way of looking at it, but since ITNs are such a core component for malaria prevention, it's really, I think, going to be a useful toolkit for everybody. So I'm not sure if I have time to go through everything, but let's just take a quick look. This toolkit breaks down the net acquisition even further into, when you have a mass campaign, there's pre-campaign, there's during the campaign, there's after the campaign. But there's other ways for nets to be acquired. There's also through continuous distribution, antenatal and immunization services. School distribution is becoming more common. Community-based distribution, private sector. So even within just getting a net in the first place, there are a lot of different considerations on when and how to do different types of SBC activities. So net use, this is, we're going to talk about the use to access ratio very soon. But it also, this section of the toolkit talks about the general trends, social and psychological determinants, preferences, net care. Is really, really, really useful. I think that when we think about people using nets, we don't necessarily think about all of the different factors that go into the decision to make a net or to sleep under a net every night, all year round. So this is pretty important. This is the use to access ratio. And I don't think anyone can explain it better than Hannah. So Hannah, can I ask you to explain this?
Hi, sure. So when we're thinking about net use, we want to make sure that we're counting people or thinking about the behavior of net use when people have access to a net they can actually use. So we can't expect people who don't have enough nets in their house for everybody to all be able to use a net. But when there are some nets in a house, we do expect some people to have the ability to use, part of that net or the net. So the use access ratio is just a simple division to divide the percentage of people who used a net the previous night. So that's one of our standard indicators over the whole population, the proportion of the population that used a net the previous night. We divide that by the percentage of people that had access to an ITN in their household the previous night. And access is determined by assuming that every net can protect 2 people. And so if you've got, 3 people in the household and they've got 1 net, then basically 2 people in the household would have access because there's space for 2 people under the 1 net that they have, and the third person would not have access. So the ratio here really tells us what we can expect realistically in terms of net use behavior, in terms of people who have the ability to use a net among that population, what percentage of the population is actually using a net. And the video is really helpful. We've got the YouTube link there.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. And those of us who have been thinking and talking about this use to access ratio for the past couple of years, really, it's a no-brainer to us. But to folks where it's new, many countries have used the indicator from MIS and DHS's that question that says, did you sleep under a net the night before? And maybe only 30% of a country slept under a net the night before. Many countries are still saying, oh my gosh, we have a huge problem with net use. Only 30% slept under the net, but they're not considering, well, does everyone have access to a net? And in many countries, access is the big problem. And so really, so only looking at those who had access to a net, then among people who are sleeping under a net, among those who have access to a net, really helps us figure out, is there a problem with net use, or is there a problem only in this place or among this group of people? So this is a really important development in the field that helps us figure out how we should be best spending our resources. Some countries have a use to access ratio, Sierra Leone, for example, of over 1, which means more than 2 people are sleeping under a net. So should we invest a lot of money and time into net use among that population? Probably not, unless we get down into the details of what areas of the country are not, their use to access ratio is not as high. So, so there was a question, I think, from Muhammad. Did we conduct any net preference studies before distribution in order to measure SBC for net use? Well, I'm glad you asked that. So, this use to access ratio is actually showing us that in the majority of places, especially in Africa, people who have access to a net are using them, even if it's not their preferred color or shape. Most people do use nets when they have access to it. The problem with net preference studies, when it comes to color at least, is that the different manufacturers make different colors of nets, for example. The orders for nets, because we're talking about millions and millions and millions of nets that have to be ordered, the process for ordering those nets often takes place a year or years before the actual distribution takes place. So really our job as SBC folks and professionals is to, unless there's a really big allergy to one type of net for some reason that people will absolutely not sleep under, our job is, if the use to access ratio is showing that some folks aren't sleeping under their nets, figure out ways in which to conduct SBC in a way that can convince people to actually use their nets. And there's been some recent examples of folks refusing to use nets for X, Y, or Z reason. But like I said, the vast majority of people who have access to a net actually use their nets. Oh, okay, and Don just mentioned that PMI also has a standard size and color that it will procure for just this reason. Yeah, and Global Fund too. So when we're talking about, huge numbers of nets, it's really, you can't order a few blue nets for one part of the country and a few white nets. The procurement process is just, it's just too huge. So thanks for that question. And thank you, Hannah, for the explanation. And she's right, the YouTube link is super duper helpful. We also have a website that goes into every country's use to access ratio with the latest data available. So, I mean, this is Kenya, and it shows by region, and this is the 2015 data set, so this is a bit old, but this just shows you that there are tools out there that can help you look at who is using the nets and where. Greater than 1 is dark green, so we can see people on the coast are really doing a good job of using those nets. We really want at least 80% of people to be using them. So, the lighter green shows that the rest, that part of the country is doing quite well. So then we can really hone in on the red areas when we're doing net use SBC activities. So there's a website, and I think it is here. Yes, here it is, itnuse.org, which looks at every PMI country at least, and it may look at some others as well, but you get a really good sense of what countries are facing when it comes to net use. There are also a number of trends in the use to access ratio that are reported in this ITN toolkit, which are really great to see. Time seasonality is huge. You know, we need people sleeping under their nets, not only during rainy season, but all nights of the year. We need to be using it consistently and correctly. It looks at socioeconomic status, age, and gender parasite prevalence. So if you need some more time to really dig into this use to access ratio, there's a number of resources to help you understand it. And it's really important that the consultants understand it, because if the consultants don't understand it, then it's hard to explain to the countries why they need to worry about it as well. But I think that this is a really great tool for SBC. We talk about net preferences. The toolkit talks about that a bit. Also net care. As I showed earlier, net care can really help extend the life of a net, or improper care can help you know, kill a net earlier. And it talks about net care as well. Oh, I think that was a double copy and paste there. This toolkit also talks about outdoor sleeping and outdoor activities, and this is becoming more of a question for a lot of countries. You know, biting usually is between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m., but the studies of the mosquito behavior is showing that, you know, that might be changing in some places, and you know, there are activities that are happening outdoors that would expose folks to malaria, even in the early morning. So the vector considerations before and after, you know, nighttime use as well are good to think about and consider. And then also misuse, disposal, and repurposing of nets when they've ended their lives. And there are a few isolated areas in which misuse has occurred. Often this gets blown out of proportion. There will be a photo taken of somebody using a net for fishing, and then all of a sudden there's this, you know, article in the New York Times that everyone is using their nets for fishing. But like we said, data shows that the vast majority of people who have nets are actually using them and sleeping under them correctly, or you know, consistently and correctly. So we like to downplay these messages unless it is a real, unless it's an identified real problem area. Special considerations in this toolkit as well include these next generation nets, places where they're doing indoor residual spraying and ITNs. Low transmission settings is becoming more and more of a concern, which is a great problem to have. And then population mobility. Okay, so that's the ITN toolkit. The ITN toolkit is available in the folder as well. I think I saw some questions. Okay, Hannah, thank you so much. Okay, great. Thanks to those that joined, and we're almost done, but I wanted to talk a bit about our malaria evidence, SBC evidence database. So some of the comments we were hearing from you know, certain donors, Global Fund and others, was why should we invest in Malaria SBC if we don't have solid data to prove that this is actually something that works? And it's true, a lot of countries didn't have really solid evidence that SBC in their country had worked to change behavior. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. You know, you need a donor to fund research in order to say that something works or doesn't work. And if the donor believes that it already doesn't work, it's really hard to convince them, you know, and research can be quite expensive. So we saw this gap and developed a database to document and assess the evidence that is already out there for Malaria SBC in order to have kind of an arsenal for countries to use when defending their SBC activities to the donors. So we looked at approximately 3,600 peer-reviewed articles and 1,700 gray literature documents, and scored all of the articles on the strength of the evidence and the extent of best practices that were used. And so now we have a database of 110 entries, although I think it's more now. And you can access the database and you can search by country, you can search by communication, intervention, study design, audience segmentation. And this will help you find, data, solid scientific data that's been vetted that you can use to help make the case for investing in malaria SBC. And especially, if we can invest in malaria, SBC research, that would help a country to be able to generate its own data as well. So this is something that you have access to. One of the last things I'm going to talk about is there is an optional SBCC module that has been developed for the MIS and the DHS for malaria specifically. And this came out of a need. I think I mentioned earlier that different countries were developing different questions to address the kind of core priority indicators that we had talked about earlier. And so in an effort to standardize that across countries and to be able to interpret it well and consistently and correctly, the working group came up with a module with the DHS, and that is in its final stages. But a country could say, on the next MIS, we would like to opt in for the SBCC module, and that solves some immediate problems as far as getting some good SBC data. But what we're finding is that every country could really use a very comprehensive malaria type of behavior survey. And there are some malaria behavior surveys going on in different countries. And there are some good tools out there that could be used to help develop a survey, or a more in-depth survey. But at the very minimum, if this module could be added, it would give the NMCPs a lot more data to work with than they currently have for SBC. So I think this is the last document I'll talk about. This is a quality checklist for Malaria SBCC. So this ensures quality throughout the program, not just at the beginning. You can make great plans, but if you're not following up, great planning does not, great planning is very important, but unless you're monitoring the quality as you're going along, you're not guaranteed to have a great malaria SBC program. So this is an easy checklist that you can use or that you could build into a plan, or, familiarize an NMCP with, so they make sure that there's quality happening as the program is being rolled out. Okay, so this is a lot to read, so I'll summarize it quite quickly. Zero Malaria Starts With Me is a rollback malaria initiative, and it's a really fantastic one, and it's gained a lot of traction. It's an advocacy-focused campaign. And so it's about building champions, it's about building political will. A lot of countries have signed on board, a lot of developed countries as well have become a part of it. There was at one point some confusion about how that advocacy campaign complements the ongoing SBC work going on in countries. And I think that they really complement each other. So we encourage, Zero Malaria Starts With Me in countries. Where we just caution to make sure that they are complementary approaches. And if implemented as planned, and the Zero Malaria Starts With Me has this really great and fantastic toolkit for rolling out. And like I said, it can be a really good complementary activity to what's going on already in the country. But just to mention that, the Zero Malaria Starts With Me is really, outward focusing and getting a big crowd, gathering advocates. But, the SBC working group really focuses on individual behavior change, and that is supported by a well-designed, evidence-based, theory-based SBC activities like we mentioned earlier. But there's absolutely great intersections between Zero Malaria Starts With Me and the ongoing SBC in countries. I think it just needs to be clear what activities are fitting under what, and where the intersection lies. So, and that can be tricky, but we've seen such great progress with Zero Malaria Starts With Me. We want to make sure that, that advocacy campaign and the SBC activities are married really well. So, I think that will fall to the consultants as well. And, we can have an ongoing conversation about what that looks like. It really depends on the country. So if there's any questions, I can take them now. I think we have a few minutes. Or you can either email me or our secretariat, which at the moment is Gabrielle Hunter, who's on the call as well, or send a Skype message or email. There's always happy to refer you if we don't know the answers to something. Yes, Gabrielle is on. Yes, she said, sorry to have been silent. She's a team member of mine and wanted to provide any support. Yes, and thank you so much, Gabrielle. The Secretariat is extremely active and follows up a lot with the different participants. So we would love for you folks to join our working group. You have access to all of these great materials. It should make your jobs much easier and less ambiguous probably. And yeah, we're here for questions. So I know I've been talking for an hour straight and you're probably sick of hearing my voice, but are there any questions?
Hello.
Yes, hi, Mohammed.
Hi, this is not a question, just a comment. I think first of all, thank you so much for this presentation. We can encompass all the key ingredients of social and behavior change communication, SBC, which we are calling now. So I think you are actually very, very well said that, majority of the countries in Southeast Asia also, they're only focusing on t-shirts, they're only focusing on posters without any understanding of the context. There is a lack of research, there's a lack of formative research. They just think that behavior change is only developing materials because it's very easy for them. So I think definitely as part of this team, we should think of how we can handle this situation, especially when we are working with countries. It's difficult to make them understand the importance of research and all those things. And second thing, as one of my colleague mentioned, I think it's also very important to build the capacity of these program managers, because when they know what BCC is, then they will be able to help us to implement the proper, way of how to design and implement strategies. So I think thank you very much for, putting us all on the same page with regard to this SBC. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Mohammed. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This is an uphill battle that we've been fighting for a long time, and it sounds like Southeast Asia, similar situation. But we're getting there, and we have a lot more evidence than we did before. And you're right, building the capacity is one of these things that is super important and needs funding. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, I think we'll make sure to add everyone to the working group list, and I think we'll make sure to send you all as well. Our last general call was just last week, and it was a really fascinating, we do a technical presentation on every call. It was a really fascinating presentation about rumor management in the Congo during a net distribution campaign when some rumor videos went out or audio went out on WhatsApp, and it spread like wildfire, and it ended up nearly tanking the entire campaign. And the speaker talked about the ways in which they managed the rumors and how they were able to successfully pull off the campaign in the end. So we'll make sure to send you the recording of that so you can be on board, since, rumor management, and, I didn't actually talk much about this, but perhaps should have in hindsight. And rumor management in the context of COVID is something that is becoming more and more important. So there's definitely rumor management for COVID-19. But there's also an intersection between malaria and COVID. And there's a number of recommendations coming out from the SBC community, Malaria SBC community, coming out in the very near future, probably, hopefully in the next couple of days. And we'll be sending that out to the working group and make sure to send it out to you folks as well. It answers a lot of questions. It looks at the WHO guidance for continuing and prioritizing malaria during this time of COVID. And you can see how it could be a complicated time. Both our fever-related illnesses, when we have stigma, we might have fewer people reporting, for testing and treatment. There's all sorts of issues. So we're looking at the WHO guidelines for continuing malaria activities, and we are then, inserting the SBC considerations that the malaria community needs to look at. So we'll make sure to be sending those out as well. Yeah. So this presentation is not currently in the folder. I'll put it in the folder right after. There's a different version of it right now. But are there any other questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you very much for your participation, and we will be in touch. And like I said, you're always welcome to reach out to either the working group, the secretariat. We're happy to help you think through things. And at the end of the day, we all want the best malaria SBC plans and strategies out there. So we're happy to do whatever we need to make that happen. So thank you for your time, and good luck with the assignments, and have a great afternoon.